Hey listener, welcome. I'm glad you could join me tonight. I'm your storyteller, and I'll be your companion as you drift off to sleep. Or perhaps as you lie there wide awake, listening to this story, unsure if you'll ever fall asleep again. You know, when you're browsing Craigslist, you never really know what you're going to get. I didn't think much of it, to be honest. I was just looking for something to fill up my new apartment. Nothing fancy, just a couch that could hold my late-night Netflix binges. So when I saw the ad titled Free Couch, Pickup Only, I thought, why not? It seemed like a good deal. The apartment I'd just moved into wasn't much, small, a bit outdated, but it was mine. A place I could call my own for the first time. I had no furniture to speak of, except for a cheap futon I'd gotten from a thrift store. So, a free couch sounded perfect. The listing was simple. Come pick up this couch. It's yours. No pictures, just a vague description. I didn't think much of it. A few clicks later, I shot the owner a quick message, and a day later, I was on my way to their place. The address was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where the trees grew so tall they blocked out the sun, giving everything a shadowed, almost claustrophobic feeling. I pulled up to the house, small brick with a chipped paint job, and immediately felt a little off. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the curtains in the front windows were drawn, giving the house an empty, abandoned vibe. But I brushed it off. It was just a free couch, right? No harm in that. I rang the doorbell, my finger lingering on the button a little longer than necessary. The door creaked open after a moment, revealing a man who looked, well, normal enough. Middle-aged, wearing a worn t-shirt and sweatpants. He gave me a tired smile and stepped aside, gesturing me in. Come on in. Couch is in the living room. I nodded and stepped past him into the house. It was eerily quiet inside. No TV running, no music, no sound at all. Just the faint smell of dust and something else, something strange like old leather and stale air. The walls were bare, no decorations or pictures. The living room was sparsely furnished, with just the couch in the middle of the room. And it was odd. I don't know how else to put it. The couch wasn't like anything I'd seen before. It wasn't an antique, but it looked like it was from another era. The fabric was a dark, almost grayish green, and there were these strange symbols stitched into the upholstery, lines, circles, and shapes that didn't seem to make any sense. They weren't random, though. They looked deliberate, almost like a pattern. Like a code. Thanks, I said, stepping closer. I was already starting to feel weird about the whole situation. Something about the place felt wrong. The man was just standing there, staring at me, his eyes almost too wide. He didn't say anything else, just motioned to the couch. You can take it. It's all yours. I glanced back at him, hesitating. He didn't seem like he was trying to pull anything weird, but I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Are you sure? I asked, feeling a little awkward. I mean, you don't mind? He just nodded slowly. Take it. It's time for it to go. So I did. I figured I was already here, and it was free after all. I didn't ask why he was giving it away, or why the house looked like it had been abandoned for years. It didn't seem important. I bent down and started to pull the couch toward the door, and that's when it happened. The man suddenly spoke up. Don't sit on it for too long, he said, his voice unnaturally calm. You won't want to. I froze, my hands gripping the armrests. I turned slowly, locking eyes with him. His expression hadn't changed, still that strange, almost vacant stare. What do you mean? I asked, trying to laugh it off. But he didn't respond. He just stood there, watching me as I struggled to move the couch out the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The whole house, the man, the couch, it was all too off. It felt like I was part of some strange experiment, like a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve. I managed to get the couch into my car, and I drove back home, trying to push the weird feeling to the back of my mind. At first, things were fine. The couch fit perfectly in the corner of my living room, and I sank into it that night, ready to relax. The fabric was rough under my fingertips, the symbols a strange contrast against the plain surroundings of the apartment. But then as I sat there, I started to feel uncomfortable. Like I wasn't alone. The room seemed to close in on me. The air felt heavier. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. Still, the feeling didn't go away. I stood up, shaking it off, and that's when I noticed it. There was a shadow on the wall. It was faint, barely noticeable at first. But it was there, just behind the couch, moving ever so slightly. I spun around, but there was nothing there. No one. My heart started racing, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I'd been under a lot of stress lately. The new apartment, the job, everything. But the feeling didn't go away. It only got worse. Every time I sat on the couch, I felt like someone was watching me. I kept hearing strange noises from the corner of the room, scratching sounds, low murmurs. And the longer I stayed there, the more I felt like something was pulling at me, dragging me down into the fabric of the couch itself. I tried to get up, but the cushions felt like they were sucking me in. It was as though the couch was alive, its strange symbols pulsing under my fingers. I pushed against it, but it felt like I was stuck in quicksand. I was trapped. I fought to get up, my heart pounding in my chest. Sweat dripped down my face. I could hear my breath quickening, my palms slick against the fabric. The shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, and the walls started closing in. I pulled myself free, stumbling back onto the floor. The room felt different now, twisted, like the walls had shifted, the ceiling too low. The door I'd come through earlier was gone. In its place, there was another door, one I didn't recognize. I knew I had to leave, but I couldn't. The more I tried to move, the more the couch seemed to reach out, its cryptic symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. It was pulling me in. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob twisted in my hand, but it was stuck. The house was holding me in place, like it had somehow changed reality, shifted dimensions. I couldn't get out. I looked back at the couch, and I swear, I saw something move in its fabric. A figure. A shadow. And then from the darkness, I heard it, a voice, barely a whisper, just above the sound of my heartbeat. Stay. It was the man's voice. But it wasn't him. I finally broke free, slamming the door open with all my strength. I didn't care what was behind me anymore. I ran, straight out the door, down the stairs, and into the night. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove straight to the police station, but they didn't believe me. They said I was tired, maybe a little overwhelmed from the move. They said the house was empty. No one lived there. But I know what happened. I felt it. That house, that couch, it wasn't real. Not in the way we understand things. It was something else, something dark. I never went back to that house. I didn't even try to look for it again. And honestly, I don't think I ever will. Sometimes I sit on my couch now, and I swear I can still feel it. That pull, like it's still waiting. Watching. I don't know how to explain it, but if you ever find a free couch on Craigslist, don't take it. No matter how good the deal is, some things aren't worth the price. And if you feel that pull, that weight in the air, trust me. It's not your imagination. It's real. Just leave. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. Story 2. I'm Sarah, and this is a story about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. It feels like it was just yesterday, but when I think about it now, it's almost like it happened to someone else. Maybe that's what makes it so hard to shake off, how it all seemed normal, even boring at first. But things like this, well, they change you. They make you realize that you never really know what's going on under the surface. So let me set the stage for you. I was living in a quiet, middle-class suburb, a place where nothing much ever happens. The kind of place where you wave at your neighbors in the morning and forget their names by the afternoon. I was 29, working a dull office job, nothing exciting, nothing glamorous. I had a small circle of friends, a decent apartment, and a car that was falling apart, but somehow always got me where I needed to go. That's when I saw the Craigslist ad. Used car for sale. Great condition. Cheap price. Call now. The price was too good to be true. A 2011 Honda Civic, barely 90,000 miles on it, going for $2,000. It was an older model, but I figured it was worth a shot. I'd been looking for a new car for a while, something reliable, and this one seemed like the perfect opportunity. I called the number in the ad. A guy named Mike answered, his voice deep and scratchy. He told me to come by that evening to check out the car. When I showed up, I was immediately taken aback. The car was parked in a driveway, half hidden under a large tree that cast long shadows across the yard. The house was small and run down, with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. But the car itself, it was pristine, well-maintained. A little dusty, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary. Mike was standing by the door, wearing a faded baseball cap and a grim expression. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too eager to drive that car off the lot for a fraction of what it should have cost. We went inside to do the paperwork. The place was dark, and the air smelled like old wood and something else I couldn't place. Mike shuffled around, muttering under his breath, as I filled out the form. It wasn't until I asked about the car's history that things started to get weird. He hesitated for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he said, "The last owner, he died. Got into a bad accident." Car was practically untouched, though. Just needed some minor repairs. I could tell he didn't want to talk about it, but I shrugged it off. Who doesn't have a weird story when selling a used car, right? I paid the man and drove off, feeling a little lighter. For the first time in months, I had a car that didn't break down every other week. I remember feeling that rush of excitement, the kind you get when you buy something new. But things started happening the very next day. It wasn't anything major at first. The radio would turn on by itself, even though I hadn't touched it. I'd hear weird static, then the faint sound of a song playing, something old, like a tune from the 90s. I thought it was just a glitch in the system. But then it happened again, and again. Every time I drove, the radio would flicker, and sometimes I'd hear muffled voices under the static, like someone was whispering my name. The real trouble started when I noticed the speedometer acting strange. It would fluctuate. 1 minute, I'd be driving at 30 miles per hour. The next it would read 80, even though I hadn't touched the gas pedal. I'd slam on the brakes, and the car would jerk like it was resisting me. I thought maybe there was something wrong with the wiring, or maybe I was just imagining things. But it didn't stop there. A week into owning the car, I started seeing things. It was always just out of the corner of my eye, something shifting in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I started noticing it more and more. Figures, shadows, shapes that shouldn't have been there. I tried to dismiss it as stress or lack of sleep. But then, I started getting the strangest feeling. Like someone was in the car with me, sitting in the back seat, just watching me. I'd checked the rear view, but no one was ever there. Just the empty space, growing heavier with every passing minute. I called Mike once to ask about the car's history, about the previous owner, but he wouldn't answer. He hadn't returned any of my texts either. I should have stopped there. I should have turned the car in, asked for my money back. But I didn't. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. One night, I decided to take the car out for a late drive, just to clear my head. The streets were empty, the sky dark. But as I turned a corner, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a figure, standing at the side of the road. A man, wearing a baseball cap, the same kind Mike had worn. He was staring at me, unmoving. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing. I looked around, but when I turned back, the man was gone. Just disappeared. I drove home as fast as I could, my mind racing. What the hell had I just seen? The next day, I drove the car again. This time, I noticed something else. The odometer was stuck on a number, 666 miles. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just another glitch. But as I drove, I noticed something else odd. Every time I passed a certain intersection, I felt like I was being pulled toward it, like the car was guiding me there against my will. I turned the car around, trying to break free from whatever pull it had on me. But the next day, I drove the same route. And the same thing happened. The car wasn't just driving me, it was steering me. I decided to look into the previous owner's death. The accident Mike had mentioned. It wasn't just a random crash. It was on a stretch of road near the same intersection I kept being drawn to. The guy's name was David Larson. He had died 6 months ago, but when I checked the records, there was no mention of what had happened to his body. No funeral. No closure. That's when the car started doing things I couldn't explain. I was driving home one night when the radio turned on, louder than ever, blasting a song I'd never heard before. But then, it wasn't just the song that made me freeze. It was the voice. It was coming from the speakers, distorted, but unmistakable. It was Mike. "Get out," the voice said. "Get out while you can." I slammed on the brakes, but the car kept moving, almost as if it was being controlled by something or someone else. It wasn't until I pulled into my driveway and shut off the engine that the voice stopped. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like the air was closing in on me. The next day, I tried to get rid of the car. I called a mechanic, told him it was acting up. He agreed to take a look, but when he tried to start the engine, it wouldn't turn on. The car wouldn't start. Not even a click. I stared at the mechanic in disbelief. It had been fine just hours ago. The car had been fine. But as I stood there, I saw something in the rearview mirror. A shadow. A figure standing outside the car looking directly at me. It was him. Mike. And this time, he was grinning. I don't know what happened next. I tried to get out of the car, but it wouldn't let me. The doors wouldn't open, no matter how hard I pulled. And that's when I realized I couldn't leave. The car was holding me captive. I woke up the next morning disoriented in my apartment. My phone was on the counter with a missed message from Mike. The message was brief. "It's yours now. No escape." I never saw Mike again. And the car? I left it at the mechanic's shop, hoping I'd never have to deal with it again. But you know what? Sometimes late at night, when I'm driving on an empty road, I still feel it, like something's pulling me, steering me towards something I can't escape. And I wonder, if I were to go back to that car, would I find Mike again? Or would I be the one to disappear this time? Just remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing is not what's on the road ahead of you, but the thing you're driving. Story 3. I never thought it would come to this. A Craigslist ad, a seemingly normal situation, and yet it would become the story that still haunts me to this day. But before I dive into that, let me introduce myself. My name's Ellie. I was 21 at the time, a college student trying to balance my studies, part-time job at a coffee shop, and my social life, though there wasn't much of that. I lived in a small apartment off campus with a roommate, Jenna. Jenna and I met freshman year, and we hit it off instantly. We were different, but we clicked. She was outgoing, always bringing people over, and I was the quieter one, content with my books and Netflix. But it worked, until one day it didn't. It all started about a week before Jenna disappeared. She'd been acting strangely, not in a she's changing way, but in a something's off way. She'd spend hours on her phone, whispering into it, and when I asked her what was going on, she'd brush me off with a forced smile. I didn't think much of it at first. People go through phases, right? But then Jenna didn't come home one night. I figured she was just staying with one of her friends, but the next morning, her side of the room was still empty. Her bed was perfectly made, her shoes neatly placed by the door, and her phone left behind. I couldn't get a hold of her. I tried calling, texting, but nothing. She just vanished. At first, I thought maybe she was avoiding me or had some personal stuff going on. But when days turned into weeks with no word from her, I started to worry. I filed a missing person report, but you know how it goes. The cops gave me the standard response. She's probably just decided to disappear for a while. They assured me that they'd look into it, but it didn't feel right. Jenna wasn't the type to just leave without telling anyone. That's when I did something I probably shouldn't have. A few days later, I posted an ad on Craigslist, looking for a new roommate. I thought it would help me feel less alone, and let's be real, rent wasn't going to pay itself. Within hours, I had a response. The message was short and to the point. I'm looking for a place. I need somewhere quiet. I can move in right away. Her name was Clara. She seemed perfect, polite, soft-spoken, and she responded quickly. After a few exchanges, we set up a time to meet. She was a bit older than me, maybe in her mid-20s, with dark hair and tired eyes. She said she worked at a nearby art gallery and was looking for a peaceful place to focus on her painting. It seemed like a good fit. When Clara moved in, everything felt normal at first. She was quiet, never asked too many questions, and kept to herself. I respected that. After the Jenna situation, I didn't want anyone intruding into my space either. But the weirdness started slowly, like a drip of water that gradually fills a cup until it overflows. At night, I'd hear soft whispering, just faint enough that I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I'd wake up, heart pounding, and lie there in the darkness, straining to hear. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of Clara walking around the apartment. But every time I tried to ask her what she was doing, she'd say she was just getting a glass of water or checking the windows. It didn't make sense, though. The lights would be off, and the house would be silent when I tried to check. I started to feel like I was going crazy. One evening, I came home to find Clara sitting on the couch, staring at a blank wall. She was completely still, not even blinking. When I asked if everything was okay, she just nodded and said, "It's fine. Just thinking." Something about that moment stuck with me. It wasn't just the stillness, but the way her voice sounded, flat, hollow. I shook it off, convinced it was just stress getting to me. But it wasn't long before the oddities escalated. I noticed her phone was always face down on the table, as if she didn't want me to see anything on it. I tried to respect her privacy, but my curiosity got the better of me. One afternoon, I casually asked if I could borrow her phone charger. She handed it to me, but before I could plug it in, I noticed a notification on her screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "You know what's going on. Don't tell anyone." My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I call the police again? I couldn't trust my instincts anymore. The days blurred into one another, and I felt like I was losing touch with reality. And then one night, everything changed. It was around midnight when I heard Clara talking to someone. I got out of bed, thinking she had a visitor. But when I peeked into the living room, I found Clara alone. Her back was to me, and she was speaking in low, hurried tones, like she was having a conversation with someone invisible. I cleared my throat, and she turned to me with wide eyes. "Oh, sorry. Didn't realize I was being loud. Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Clara hesitated, then smiled nervously. "I wasn't talking to anyone. I was just thinking," but I could see the tremor in her hands. The way her gaze darted to the corner of the room, like she was expecting someone. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I decided to go into the basement. I hadn't been down there in weeks. There were old boxes and storage, mostly forgotten things we didn't need. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw something that stopped me cold. There was a door. I'd never noticed it before. It was tucked away in the far corner, hidden behind a stack of boxes. I approached it slowly, my hand trembling as I turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a small, cluttered room. The walls were covered in strange, hastily scribbled notes, photos of people I didn't recognize, and drawings of things that made my stomach turn. And then there it was, a picture of Jenna. She was standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, a smile on her face. But it wasn't just any photo, it was a Polaroid. I could tell because of the yellowed edges and the way it had been stuck on the wall with tape. It was a picture I had never seen before, one that didn't exist in any of her photo albums. I felt my chest tighten as I looked closer. There were more photos of me, photos of Clara. But they weren't taken casually. They were taken at odd angles, like someone had been watching us. And then, there was a note pinned to the wall with a rusty nail. It read, "The game has begun. You should have never posted that ad. You'll never leave." I froze. I knew deep down that the person who had been watching me was closer than I thought. Clara wasn't just hiding something, she was part of it. She wasn't who she said she was. I ran upstairs, but the door to my apartment was locked. I banged on it, shouting for Clara, but there was no answer. The house was silent. I don't know how long I was there, trapped in the basement, staring at the walls. But when I finally broke down the door and managed to escape, Clara was gone. Vanished. The police never found any traces of her. The only thing they found were the photos, dozens of them, hidden all over the apartment, showing me in various parts of the house. They even found photos of me sleeping. They asked me if I had any idea who could be doing this. But I couldn't tell them anything. Not the truth. I haven't lived in that apartment since. Every time I try to go back to that place, something pulls me away. The whispers, the feeling that someone is watching me. I can't shake it. I've been careful. I've changed everything about my life. But sometimes I wonder, what if they're still out there? What if I'm next? So, if there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that when something feels off, you have to listen to your gut. Because once you ignore it, it might be too late. And you'll never know who's been watching you all along. Story 4. I was a pretty normal guy, living in a small town, working a regular 9-to-5 job, and enjoying weekends that mostly consisted of errands, Netflix, and a bit of takeout. Life was calm, uneventful, boring even. But then things changed, and I can't really explain it. It wasn't until much later that I pieced everything together. And now, well, I can't forget any of it. I'm Brian, by the way. I was 28 at the time. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had just moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. We didn't have much, just the essentials, a couch, a couple of chairs, a bed, and the usual kitchen stuff. But one night, I was browsing through Craigslist, like I often did when I was bored, and something caught my eye. There was a post titled "Free Furniture, Pick Up Only." Now, it wasn't like we were desperate for furniture, but we were definitely looking for some additional pieces. And free? Well, who says no to free, right? The ad said everything was in good condition. So, I called the number, and a woman named Julie answered. She told me they were moving out of state and needed to clear out everything in their house. They were basically giving away the furniture for nothing. Just come pick it up. Simple. When I mentioned I could come by that evening to grab it, she sounded a little relieved. "Please come by any time," she said. "It's all sitting there, waiting for you." Sarah didn't seem too thrilled, but I convinced her to come with me. It was a nice evening, cool air, the scent of fresh grass still hanging in the air from the day's rain. We drove to the address, a small house at the end of a quiet street. It seemed fine enough, though a little eerie. There weren't any lights on, and no cars parked out front, which made me wonder if they had already moved. But the porch light was on, so I figured it was safe to approach. We rang the doorbell. No answer. We rang it again. Nothing. So I knocked. Finally, the door opened. A woman in her 40s, Julie, I assumed, greeted us with a tired smile. She looked almost worn out. Her eyes were sunken, and there was a strange stillness to her presence. But she seemed nice enough, offering a soft hello as she ushered us inside. The house was eerily quiet. No sounds of life, just the faint hum of a refrigerator somewhere. It was like walking into a place frozen in time, with furniture neatly arranged, but no sense of warmth or life in it. "I'm sorry it's so quiet," Julie said, as if reading my mind. "We've already packed most of our things, but feel free to take whatever you want." It was a bit odd, but I wasn't going to back out now. Sarah and I made our way into the living room, where a couch, a couple of armchairs, and an old coffee table were set up in front of a large, dark window. The furniture wasn't great, old, a little worn, but it was free, and it would do for our place. We made our choice. I loaded the furniture into the car, and Sarah helped by grabbing a few smaller pieces. Julie didn't say much more. She just stood by the door, staring at us as we left. It felt uncomfortable, but nothing that seemed too alarming at the time. It wasn't until we got back home that things started to feel weird. At first, it was little things. The couch we brought back. Every time we sat on it, it made an odd creaking noise, like something was shifting inside it. We thought nothing of it, but then things began moving on their own. The coffee table would shift an inch or two in the middle of the night. A chair would tilt over. At first, I just figured it was the old furniture settling, or maybe even a draft. But after a while, it felt like something more. The apartment began to feel wrong. One night, Sarah woke me up in the middle of the night. "Brian," she whispered, "do you hear that?" I sat up in bed, trying to listen, but all I could hear was the quiet hum of the city outside. Nothing strange. "I think it's coming from the living room," Sarah said, her voice trembling. I rolled my eyes, thinking it was just the creaks of an old building. I told her to go back to sleep, that it was probably nothing. But then, I heard it too. A faint whispering, like someone was talking, but I couldn't make out any words. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the couch. Now, I'll admit, I wasn't exactly the bravest person. But I got up to check. The moment I stepped into the living room, the whispering stopped. The room was dark, everything still. But it felt off. There was a coldness in the air, like something was watching me. "Sarah," I said, "I'm just going to check the furniture. Maybe something's loose." I turned the lights on, moved the couch around, and nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary. But still, that feeling lingered. I didn't sleep well that night, and I could tell Sarah was feeling the same. Things got worse after that. We'd hear footsteps at night, shadows moving past the doorframe. And when I checked the furniture during the day, it was always just slightly different. A cushion was out of place. The coffee table was pushed a bit farther than where we had left it. Then came the strange phone call. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. It was Julie. "Brian," she said in a low, almost frantic voice. "I need to tell you something. Something about the furniture." I felt my heart race. "Julie, what is it?" She paused, like she wasn't sure how to say it. "The furniture, it belonged to my family. They disappeared. Years ago. No one knew what happened. We've never found them. I just need to warn you. It's not just furniture. It's cursed." The line went dead. I stood there, staring at my phone, my blood running cold. I tried to call her back, but the number was disconnected. We did some research. Turns out, Julie's family had indeed disappeared. Her husband and 2 kids vanished without a trace, their house left empty, just like it had been when we picked up the furniture. And the more I dug, the more I realized that people had been disappearing in that area for years. Some went missing, others were found, but all of them had some kind of connection to the furniture, to that cursed house. I don't know what happened next. The whispers started again, louder this time, and this time I could hear the words. They were calling my name, Sarah's name. And then, a shadow passed across the living room, bigger than any shadow I'd ever seen. I knew then that we had to leave. I didn't want to take any chances. We packed up everything we could, locked the door, and never went back. But sometimes, even now, when I'm alone late at night, I hear that whispering coming from somewhere. And I wonder, what if I didn't escape? What if we never left that cursed place? Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens when you're living in fear. It's the dread of knowing that the moment you think you're safe, you might not be. Be careful about the things you take for granted, and remember, everything has a price. And sometimes that price is your peace of mind. Story 5. I'm not proud of what happened. I'm not proud of how I handled it either, but it's been on my mind for a long time. I think it's time I shared it, just in case anyone out there might learn from it. So let's start with the basics. I'm Dave. I was 28 years old back then, living in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't have a ton of friends, just a couple of co-workers I'd grab beers with sometimes. Life was pretty normal, nothing exciting. I worked a steady job doing marketing for a small company. Nothing to complain about, but nothing to write home about either. But then came that Craigslist ad. I'd been struggling to pay the bills and looking for side work. One afternoon, I found myself scrolling through the gigs section on Craigslist. I wasn't desperate yet, but the thought of a little extra cash sounded nice. A post caught my eye. It was short and to the point. Looking for help around the house, good pay. Call or text for details. It didn't look too weird at first, but something about it stood out. The text was almost too clean. No typos. No fancy marketing gimmicks. It was almost like it was written by someone who knew how to hook you in without saying much. I sent a text, figuring it couldn't hurt. Me. Hi, I saw your ad. I'm interested in the job. What's the work? The reply came fast, within seconds. Stranger. Hi, thanks for reaching out. It's a simple job. Just some tasks around the house. I'll explain more when you get here. Pay is good. Can you meet at 5? The simplicity of it should have raised a red flag, right? But I was desperate, so I agreed. I arrived at the address, a quiet, somewhat dilapidated house on the edge of town. The neighborhood wasn't exactly fancy, but it was safe enough. A small yard, old windows, the kind of place where no one would think twice about a job offer. When I rang the doorbell, a man in his late 50s answered. He was dressed casually, wearing a plaid shirt and jeans. He had this calm, almost unnerving smile, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just friendly. Dave? He asked, looking me up and down as though he was sizing me up. Yeah, that's me, I replied, trying to keep things casual. He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he stepped aside, letting me into the dimly lit hallway. Come in, he said. I'll show you the place. We'll talk work as we go. The house felt strange, old, but with an unnatural stillness to it. It wasn't dusty or abandoned, but it had that eerie vibe you get in a house that feels like it's been stuck in time. Everything was arranged just so, but not in a way that felt lived in. More like a display. He led me through the house, showing me the rooms. Most of the tasks he mentioned seemed mundane. Sweeping, organizing a few rooms, maybe moving some old furniture. But then, when we got to the back room, things started to feel a little off. This room's where the work's really needed, he said, gesturing to a door at the end of the hall. I'd noticed that this door was slightly ajar, and the light inside flickered. I've got some things that need to be sorted out in here. When I stepped inside, the air changed. It was cold, and the light in the room seemed wrong. Not just dim, but almost like it was flickering to life. I didn't want to seem like a coward, so I nodded and stepped in. There were boxes everywhere, some old, some newer, but what struck me the most were the strange markings on the walls. Symbols that didn't belong, things that looked like they came from a nightmare. I almost thought I saw a shadow move in the corner of the room, but when I blinked, it was gone. Do you have a preference for where to start? The man asked, his voice a little too calm. It doesn't matter. Just pick something. I was still trying to wrap my head around the room when I heard my phone buzz. It was a text from the man. Stranger, you can start by moving the boxes in the corner. Take them to the basement when you're done. It's not hard work, just tiring. I stared at the message, unsure if I should be getting text instructions for a simple task. But I shrugged it off. Maybe he just didn't want to be bothered. I decided to get moving and start with the boxes. As I was lifting one, I saw something that I can't explain, just outside the window. A figure, a silhouette standing under the streetlight, staring at the house. I froze. My heart skipped. It was as if they were looking directly at me. Then, just as quickly, they vanished into the shadows. I didn't think much about it at first. I convinced myself it was nothing, a trick of the light. But then, as I dragged the boxes to the basement, I received another message. Stranger, great job. Now take the second box and place it on the counter in the kitchen. Be careful. I've told you everything you need to know. I thought this was getting strange. There was no reason for a job to feel like a game. But I obeyed. By the time I placed the second box on the counter, I started to feel an unease that I couldn't shake. Like there was something looming over me. And then, the next message arrived. Stranger, now that you've completed step 1, it's time for the real test. That's when I realized this wasn't a normal job. I felt my pulse racing. I opened the kitchen door to find the man standing there. His smile was wider now, and something about his eyes seemed wrong, like he was enjoying this way too much. "You've done well," he said, his voice slow, deliberate. "But now I need you to complete a more important task. There's a box in the back room. It's under the floorboards." My stomach churned. I wanted to leave, but I was in too deep. I felt like I had no choice but to keep going. What could I do? Call the cops. He hadn't done anything illegal, yet. I walked back to the room, my heart pounding. When I pulled up the floorboards, my hands trembled. Inside, there was a small, old box covered in dust. The moment I touched it, my phone buzzed again. "Stranger, that box contains the final test. Open it, and you'll find your reward. Or you won't." I felt a wave of dread. There was no way I could open it. But there was something deep inside me, some dark curiosity that drove me to tear open the box. Inside, there was nothing. Just a single piece of paper with a name on it. My name. And then I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind me. I spun around. The man was there, smiling, holding a knife in his hand. "You didn't think you were done, did you?" he said. I bolted. I didn't care what was behind me. I didn't care about the knife. I just ran. I never looked back, but I heard his voice calling after me. "You're not finished yet, Dave. This is only the beginning." I ran and ran until I was out of breath, and by the time I reached the street, I could hear his footsteps echoing behind me. But they were growing fainter until finally, I reached the end of the block. I didn't stop until I was on a busy street, surrounded by strangers. I went straight to the police, and I told them everything. But when they arrived at the house, the place was empty. No man, no strange markings, no boxes. Just an abandoned house, like nothing had ever happened. I've moved since then. Changed my number. Deleted my Craigslist account. But sometimes, at night, I can still feel it, like someone is watching me. The thing is, I don't know if the man was real. I don't know if the house was real. But I do know this. Whatever I went through, it was real enough to change me forever. So listen to me. Be careful what you post online. There are things out there that can't be explained, things that just wait for the right moment to show themselves. And sometimes, it's not what happens in the moment that's the scariest, it's knowing that it could happen again. Trust your gut. It might be the only thing that saves you. Story 6. I'm 27, and I live in a quiet little town in Ohio. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing too crazy ever happens. If you're looking for action, this isn't the spot. But that's how I liked it. Quiet. Safe. Predictable. Or at least, it used to be. I remember the day it all started. How everything seemed so normal. How I thought I was just doing a good deed. I had always wanted a dog, and after months of thinking about it, I figured it was finally time. So like most people in this tech-driven world, I decided to check Craigslist. I wasn't expecting anything special, just a dog that needed a home. What I didn't expect was the ad that caught my eye. Free dog. Needs a good home. 3 years old. Very obedient. No questions asked. Serious inquiries only. I wasn't exactly sure what the no questions asked part meant, but it sounded a little sketchy. But still, I emailed the guy. I thought it was worth checking out. Maybe someone just couldn't keep their dog anymore, and they wanted to give it a good life. The next day, I got a reply. The man, whose name was Steve, gave me an address and told me to come by if I was serious. "Come today," he wrote. "We can meet. I'll introduce you to her." I didn't think much of it. I just figured he was in a hurry to get rid of the dog, and it wasn't like I had anything else to do that afternoon. So I drove over. It wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes out of town. The house was on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees. It was the kind of place that felt untouched, like it had been there forever. The house looked worn down, a little neglected, but nothing that screamed danger. I rang the doorbell, and Steve answered right away. He was a tall guy, maybe in his mid-40s, with dark hair and a scruffy beard. He seemed nice enough, but there was something off about his smile. Maybe it was the way he greeted me, too eager, like he'd been waiting for me. He didn't seem surprised at all, almost like he'd been expecting me. "Come on in," he said, stepping aside. I glanced around, noticing that the house was a little too quiet. There was no sign of a dog, not even a bark. "So where is she?" I asked, trying to make the conversation casual. "She's out back," Steve said, his eyes narrowing for just a second before he turned and walked down the hall. "I'll go get her." I followed him, a little uncertain now. The house felt strange. The walls were covered with old, peeling wallpaper, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic scratching sound coming from the back door. Steve opened it, and there she was. The dog. At first glance, she looked like any other dog, medium-sized, with sleek fur, a golden brown color. She had an almost regal air about her, standing perfectly still as she waited for me to approach. But there was something off. Her eyes. They weren't the warm, loving eyes you expect from a dog. They were cold, calculating, like she was watching me with some sort of strange intelligence. Her name is Daisy, Steve said, his voice oddly flat. She's very well trained. I crouched down to pet her, but when I reached out, she backed away slightly. Not out of fear, but like she was avoiding me. That wasn't normal. Most dogs, when you're a stranger, they're excited to meet you. Not Daisy. She stood there, staring at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Steve seemed to notice my hesitation. She's not used to being around strangers, that's all, he said quickly. But she'll warm up to you. I wasn't so sure about that, but I decided to push past the odd feeling in my gut. I was already there, and I had driven all this way. So I agreed to take her. Steve handed me the leash, and Daisy didn't resist when I clipped it onto her collar. She followed me out of the backyard and into my car, no struggle, no hesitation. It was like she had been trained to do everything on command, which, to be honest, was impressive. But it also made me uneasy. Dogs are supposed to have a little more independence than that, right? The ride home was mostly silent. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting Daisy to be staring at me, but she never did. She just sat there, completely still, like she was waiting for something. When we got back to my apartment, I set up a little bed for her in the living room and figured I'd give her some time to adjust. I had no idea how long she'd been in Steve's care or what kind of environment she'd been living in, so I thought it was best to let her settle in. That night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard a soft thump from the living room, like Daisy was walking around. I'd gotten used to the sounds of my old dog pacing at night, but this was different. It wasn't a normal dog sound. It was too deliberate. I told myself I was imagining things. Daisy was just getting used to the new place, right? She was probably just trying to get comfortable. But then the next day, things started to get weirder. I woke up to find Daisy sitting in the kitchen, just staring at the fridge. Not barking, not moving, just staring. I tried to call her over, but she didn't budge. When I got close, she finally turned her head toward me, but instead of a wagging tail or a happy face, she just looked at me. Her eyes were blank, like she didn't recognize me at all. I felt uneasy again, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was just adjusting to the new environment. But then things escalated. Over the next few days, Daisy began following me everywhere. Into the bathroom, into the kitchen. She even followed me into my bedroom, lying down at the foot of the bed, watching me as I slept. No matter where I went, Daisy was there. It was getting worse. And the thing is, she didn't seem like a normal dog anymore. It wasn't just the fact that she was following me, it was the way she moved. Her movements were stiff, almost mechanical. Every step seemed calculated, like she was waiting for me to give her a command. The worst part? I couldn't remember when I had started giving her commands. It wasn't like I told her what to do, but she just seemed to know. She would do things without me saying a word. Sit. Stay. Come. It was like she was anticipating my thoughts. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find out more about her, so I contacted Steve again. I asked him about Daisy's background, but he was evasive. He didn't want to talk much, but eventually, he admitted something that chilled me to the bone. She was part of an experiment, he said, almost as if he had been waiting for me to ask. A research project. They were testing obedience, behavioral conditioning. She's been trained for this. Trained for what? I asked, my voice trembling. To replace someone, he said, and that's when I understood. Daisy wasn't just a dog. She was something else. She was trying to replace someone who had been lost, someone important. Someone she was somehow connected to. That's when I realized the truth. Daisy hadn't just been trained to obey commands. She had been trained to become part of someone's life, someone who had disappeared, someone who had been replaced. And now she had chosen me. I don't know if it was the experiment or something else, but from that moment on, Daisy became more than just a pet. She was an obsession. She wasn't just following me. She was trying to be me. The worst part? I couldn't escape her. Everywhere I went, she was there. In my dreams. In my thoughts. Watching me. I don't know how it happened, but somehow, Daisy had become a part of me. Now, I don't know what happened to Steve. I don't know if he's still out there, still experimenting, still watching. But I know one thing for sure. I can never escape Daisy. She's always with me. watching, waiting. Sometimes I think I hear her whispering to me, "Stay, sit, obey." Story 7. I wasn't expecting anything weird to happen. I wasn't even looking for anything strange when I stumbled upon that old camera on Craigslist. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. My name's Tom. I'm a photographer, well, more of a hobbyist, really. Not professionally, just a guy who likes to capture moments, you know. My apartment is small, barely big enough for the clutter I've accumulated over the years, but it's mine. And for the most part, everything was exactly how I liked it, predictable, calm, quiet. At the time, I was living alone in a small neighborhood in the city. It wasn't anything special, just a few blocks of old brick buildings and the occasional stray dog. My job was typical too. I worked from home, doing freelance stuff to make ends meet, and every now and then I'd get an exhibition or two. Nothing too big, but enough to make me feel like I was living my dream. It was one of those slow, quiet afternoons when I came across the Craigslist ad. Vintage camera, $30. Good condition, needs a little TLC. There was a grainy photo of an old camera with the seller's message attached. Good camera, but I don't need it anymore. The ad felt offbeat, in a way that spoke to me. You know, the kind of thing that might just get you thinking, why not? I'd always been a sucker for old cameras. There's just something about them, the nostalgia they carry. Something about how the old-world technology feels when you hold it in your hands. The excitement of imagining all the photos it could have taken in its time. So, I responded to the ad, figuring that even if the camera wasn't great, it'd still be fun to tinker with. The next morning, I drove over to Tom's place. I'm not exaggerating when I say his apartment was one of those places that feels like a time capsule from the past. Everything in his space looked a little too dated, a little too meticulously placed, as though he was frozen in time. But he didn't strike me as strange, he was just off. He handed me the camera with barely a word, avoiding eye contact, his hands shaking slightly. Something about the way he acted made me feel uneasy, but I chalked it up to him just being awkward. I paid him and left, the camera now mine. I was excited to try it out. Something about it felt special, even though it was probably the cheapest camera I'd ever bought. The leather was cracked, the lens scratched, but the weight of it in my hand was oddly comforting. I could already imagine the kinds of photos I'd take with it, vintage shots of the city streets, maybe a few portraits of friends. I was determined to make it work. I set the camera on my kitchen table and started taking some test shots around the apartment. The lens wasn't as sharp as I liked, but the grainy, faded effect was what I expected. It felt like I was stepping into someone else's shoes, maybe a photographer from decades ago, someone with a completely different perspective on the world. At first, the photos were just mundane. The potted plant on the windowsill, the bottle of wine on my kitchen counter, the reflection of myself in the mirror as I set the camera down. They were blurry but nostalgic. Nothing to make me think anything was wrong. But then, there was that first odd photo. I'd set the camera down and left it for a few hours while I worked on some editing. When I came back, I found a picture of a woman standing in my kitchen. I could tell it was my kitchen, same countertop, same worn tiles, but I didn't recognize her. She had dark hair, was dressed in a black coat, and her face was mostly obscured by shadows. But her eyes, they were unmistakable. They were looking directly into the lens, and there was an unsettling calm in them. I blinked, confused. I had never taken that picture. I wasn't anywhere near the kitchen when the shot was taken. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just an accidental shot or a trick of the light. But the more I looked at it, the more uncomfortable I became. The woman didn't look like anyone I knew. She looked familiar, but not in a way that made sense. The feeling stuck with me, and over the next few days, the unease grew. The photos kept coming, each one more bizarre than the last. A man standing in the park, his head turned just slightly, as though he had noticed someone behind him. I hadn't been that close to him when I took the picture, let alone snapped it. A group of people sitting on a bench by the bus stop. They didn't even know I was there, or so I thought. Every time I took a photo, I felt like they were watching me, like they could feel my presence in a way I couldn't understand. It became unsettling, but the real turning point came when I developed a roll of film and found something terrifying. A picture of a woman, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. She was standing at the edge of a street I didn't recognize, bathed in the glow of a street lamp. I remember staring at the photo for hours, trying to figure out where I had taken it. But no matter how hard I thought, I couldn't place it. It was only when I checked the news the next morning that I realized something was terribly wrong. The woman in the photo was dead. She had been killed in a hit and run on the exact street I had never been to. The details matched the photo too closely. Her pale face, her wide, fearful eyes. I froze, my stomach dropping to my feet. It couldn't be. This was impossible. I started obsessing over the camera. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that every photo was of someone who had either already died or would soon meet some tragic fate. A man in the park. He was found dead in a car crash 2 days after I'd snapped his photo. Another photo of a teenager sitting on a bench. He had drowned in a swimming accident the very next day. The more I looked into it, the more I realized this wasn't just a camera. It was predicting deaths. It was capturing the last moments of people's lives. I tried to stop using it, but the camera called to me, every roll of film a new mystery, a new chance to uncover the truth. I felt like I was chasing something bigger than myself. I had to know who owned it before me, and why it was like this. I reached out to Tom, but when I showed him the pictures, he recoiled. "You don't understand," he muttered, his eyes darting nervously. "That camera, it's not just a camera. It shows what's coming. It shows people's deaths. Why didn't you warn me?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. "I didn't know you'd use it," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "You should have never bought it. You should have left it where it was." I left his apartment feeling worse than I'd ever felt in my life. I didn't know what to believe. I wasn't even sure what I'd gotten myself into. The camera had become a part of my life in a way that I couldn't explain. It was as if I was bound to it, and I couldn't escape. And then the next photo came. It was of me. I didn't recognize the place. It wasn't my apartment. It wasn't anywhere familiar. But there I was, standing in front of it, holding the camera. I was looking directly at it, as though I had been caught in a moment I didn't know I was in. The photo was haunting, but it wasn't just the photo. It was the way the camera had captured me, alone, vulnerable, as though it knew something I didn't. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call. It was a report on the news. A man who lived in the building next to mine had been found dead. The cause was unclear. No one knew how or why. But the details, the circumstances, mirrored the photo. He had died exactly as I had seen it. I realized with a sickening clarity what the camera was doing. It wasn't just a witness to death. It was the cause. Each picture seemed to pull someone closer to their fate, as though the camera itself was marking them, setting them on a path they couldn't escape. It wasn't long before I started seeing the people from the photos everywhere, on the streets, in the park, in the coffee shop I frequented. But this time, they weren't just strangers. They felt like shadows. They looked like they were waiting for something. I couldn't stop the feeling that I was being watched, that the camera was pulling me towards something I couldn't understand. I had to get rid of it. But where do you hide something like that? How do you escape the curse of something so tied to death? In the end, I don't know if it was the camera or something else that got to me. But I left, packed my things, left the city, and never looked back. I don't know who owns the camera now or where it ended up, but I know one thing for sure. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. Story 8. You know those days when everything feels normal? When nothing out of the ordinary happens, and life just carries on like you expect it to. That's the way things were for me, up until that night. Up until everything changed. I'm Emily, and at the time, I was living with my husband, Mark, and our 3-year-old daughter, Sophie, in a small suburban town. Nothing special. We were your average family, work, daycare, the occasional weekend trip to the park. Our life was predictable, stable, even a little boring. And I think at that point, I kind of liked it that way. It was a Friday evening, and Mark and I had been talking for weeks about getting a break. A proper night out, just the two of us. Sophie, of course, needed a sitter, and we usually asked family, but they were all out of town that weekend. So we did what any modern parents would do. We went online. Craigslist. Yeah, I know. We should have known better. But there it was, an ad for a babysitter. Her name was Sarah. She seemed perfect, young, experienced, glowing references. She had a few pictures of herself with kids, all smiling and happy. The ad was simple enough. Trustworthy babysitter available for your date nights. I figured, why not? We exchanged a few messages, and everything seemed fine. We arranged for her to come over at 7 p.m., and by 8:30, Mark and I were out the door for our first real date night in months. We didn't think twice. Sophie was always such a good kid. She'd taken to babysitters in the past, and we felt confident. We'd be back before midnight. It was just a quick dinner, a chance to reconnect. The kind of night everyone needs sometimes. But it didn't stay that simple. The first sign something was off happened when we got home. The door was slightly ajar. Mark pushed it open, and we stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. We always left a few lights on when we went out, just in case. But tonight, every light was off. A flicker of unease settled in my stomach. Maybe she was just being too cautious, I thought. Maybe she turned everything off to keep the electricity bill down. Mark called out for Sophie, but there was no answer. We didn't panic at first. Maybe she was asleep. It had been a long day. But then we looked around. The kitchen was spotless. Sarah was a neat freak, apparently. But what really made my heart skip a beat was Sophie's favorite blanket, lying on the floor by the couch, like she'd been playing with it. My mind raced. Something wasn't right. We searched the house, calling her name, but there was no sign of Sophie. No sign of Sarah either. The front door was locked. I ran upstairs, checking every room. And then I noticed it. Sophie's door was cracked open, just a little more than usual. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It was empty. Gone. I can't explain it. I looked around the room like maybe she was hiding behind the curtains, or maybe in the closet. I even checked under the bed, though I knew she wasn't there. But there was nothing. The room was as silent as the rest of the house. Mark came up behind me, his voice trembling. "Emily, what's going on? Where is she?" The words didn't even make sense. Where is she? How was I supposed to answer that? It didn't make sense. I'd left Sophie here, just hours ago, safe and sound. Now she was gone. We called the police, of course. They arrived in minutes, and I could barely explain anything to them. I kept thinking about Sarah, the babysitter who had promised to take care of our daughter. She was gone. The front door was locked, but it didn't feel like anyone had broken in. The windows weren't forced open. The police did a thorough sweep, but they found nothing unusual. Except one thing. They found Sarah's purse in the living room, along with her phone. But there was no sign of her. We didn't sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Mark kept pacing, staring out the window, trying to piece together anything that might explain this. I kept going over our messages with Sarah, trying to find something I missed. That's when I saw it. The last message she'd sent me. "I'm so excited to meet you guys tonight. I love spending time with kids," smiley face. But then a photo attached. A picture of Sarah smiling, sitting on a park bench. And in the background, a familiar face. A face I recognized. It was one of the kids from her photos. But it wasn't Sophie. And there was something off about it. A kind of strange look in the child's eyes. Not playful, not innocent. Like they were trying to say something. Something that was too blurry for me to understand. I froze. What was going on? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led down some kind of twisted path. It wasn't just about Sophie. It was bigger than that. The police weren't much help. They had no leads. They didn't even know who Sarah really was. I thought about everything. The glowing references, the sweet demeanor. Could it all have been a facade? A mask? Who is this woman, really? I started digging. I looked through the records. The photos she sent me weren't from the family she claimed to be from. She didn't even exist in any official databases. It was like she'd disappeared from the world, only to appear for this one job. But then, I found something worse. A news story. It was buried deep in an online archive. 2 years ago, another child had gone missing in the area. A girl about the same age as Sophie. The family had hired a babysitter from Craigslist. The same name. Sarah. I felt sick. My body was shaking, my hands sweating. I scrolled through the rest of the article. More stories like it, older ones, but always the same pattern. Babysitter disappears. No sign of the child. No signs of struggle. This wasn't just some random case. There was a history here. The rest of the investigation was a blur. Days went by and still no sign of Sophie. No trace of Sarah. We reached out to the other families, and eventually, a chilling picture emerged. We weren't the first. We weren't even close. I don't think I'll ever forget the moment I realized the truth. This woman, this monster, she wasn't just a babysitter. She was something darker. Something that thrived on the trust of innocent families. She wasn't running from the law. She was hiding from something much worse. She didn't need a reason. She just needed an opportunity. I've tried to move on since then. Mark and I still live in the same house, though it feels different now. Sometimes, I swear I hear Sophie's laughter, just faintly carried on the wind. I can almost see her running through the halls. I guess that's the hardest part. The not knowing. The wondering if you'll ever get her back. And the nagging thought that this might just be the beginning. You think you're safe. You think you know who to trust. But sometimes, the people you invite into your life have already been hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the right moment to strike. Story 9. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never imagined that renting an apartment would turn into something like a nightmare. But here I am, telling you my story, one I never thought I'd have to share. If you're thinking it's just another creepy landlord tale, trust me, it's not. This one is different. It's real, and it could happen to anyone. I'm Emily, and back then I was 24, just starting out in the city, trying to get my feet under me. I just landed a decent job at a marketing firm. My first real step into adulthood. I felt like I was doing everything right. A new apartment, a steady paycheck, the freedom I had been craving since leaving my small town. Everything was coming together. Until it didn't. I found my apartment through Craigslist. The rent was more affordable than I expected, and the place seemed decent enough for a beginner like me. A cozy one-bedroom, hardwood floors, and a little balcony. Just the right amount of space for me to live alone without feeling too cramped. I thought I'd scored big, especially since the landlord, Mr. Hopkins, seemed like a pleasant old man. He was in his late 60s, maybe early 70s, tall and thin with sharp features, but his smile had this warm charm that made you feel like he genuinely cared about his tenants. When I first met him to sign the lease, he seemed normal. A little too eager to help, maybe, but he seemed harmless. He asked if I wanted any furniture, or if I needed help setting anything up, but I politely declined. I was independent, and I wasn't about to let some older guy tell me how to live my life. But he insisted on showing me around, pointing out things like the water shut-off valve, the extra closet in the hallway, and the oddest thing of all, the storage room in the basement. Most people don't even know it's there, he said with a chuckle. But you're welcome to use it whenever you need. I smiled, said thank you, and signed the papers. I was eager to move in and start my new chapter. The first few days were normal. I settled in, unpacked my things, and started getting used to the sounds of the city outside my window. But then things started to feel off. It wasn't anything big at first, just small things. I noticed Mr. Hopkins showing up unannounced a lot. He'd knock on my door, asking if I needed anything, like some light bulbs, or even offering to help me take out the trash. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much of it. He was just a landlord, right? They're supposed to help. But after the third or fourth time, I began to feel uncomfortable. I was an adult, and I could take care of myself. So one evening, after he knocked to check on the plumbing, I politely told him I was fine and asked him not to come by unless it was an emergency. He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a sort of sadness, maybe disappointment. But I dismissed it. That was when the strange phone calls started. At first, I thought it was a wrong number. The voice on the other end was deep and raspy, but the moment I picked up, it would hang up. It happened 3 times in one day. I looked at the caller ID each time, and it was always a private number. But then, one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a knock on my door again. I opened it, expecting Mr. Hopkins, but no one was there. Just a note, sitting on the doormat. It read, "I can't let you leave." I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood there for a while, staring at the paper, wondering if I was just overreacting. I didn't even know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't normal. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just a misplaced prank. The next day, I ran into him again in the hallway. He was standing outside my door, staring at the ground when I approached. When he saw me, he straightened up and smiled, too wide, too forced. "Is everything all right, Emily?" he asked, his voice trembling a bit. I nodded, trying to keep it together. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just been busy." He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded anyway. "You know, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help. Always." Something about the way he said that made my skin crawl. It was too much. It wasn't just the landlord checking in. It felt like he was watching me. Over the next week, his behavior escalated. He began showing up more frequently, and each time, he had an excuse. "I thought you might need a new air filter," or "there's a leak in the ceiling, I'll just take a look." But nothing was wrong. Nothing needed fixing. And then, one night, things took a darker turn. I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. My heart raced. I knew it wasn't the wind, not with the way the hinges groaned. Slowly, I sat up in bed, the cold sweat running down my back, and I saw him. Mr. Hopkins, standing in my bedroom doorway, staring at me with his wild, unblinking eyes. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could barely breathe. "Emily," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I told you. I can't let you leave." I forced myself to sit up, my hands trembling. "What are you doing here?" I croaked. He didn't answer. He just stood there, his smile stretched across his face in a way that made me want to throw up. The smell of stale cigarettes clung to his clothes, filling the room. He stepped forward, and I backed away, my mind racing for an escape plan. "Mr. Hopkins, please leave," I shouted, more out of fear than any hope of reasoning with him. But he only took another step, his gaze growing more intense. "It's too late for that now. You're mine, Emily." His words hit me like a punch. I stumbled out of bed, knocking over a lamp in the process, but I didn't care. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I held the phone to my ear. The operator answered, and I tried to explain, but the words tangled in my throat. I couldn't get it out fast enough. Mr. Hopkins lunged forward, just as I screamed into the phone. The operator assured me help was on the way, but I didn't know if I could hold on that long. Suddenly, the door crashed open. I turned to see two officers rushing in, guns drawn. They had been watching the building after a neighbor reported hearing strange noises. Mr. Hopkins froze, his expression shifting from manic joy to cold, calculated menace. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I've lived here for decades. This is my place." She was never supposed to leave. She never left. The officers restrained him, dragging him out of my apartment. As they did, I could barely process what had just happened. It wasn't just an obsession with me. It wasn't even about the apartment. Mr. Hopkins had been living in that building long before I moved in. His wife, his children, every tenant who had ever left. They were gone. And in his mind, he had to keep it that way. The investigation revealed that he had been living there illegally, hiding in plain sight for years. The landlord he claimed to be? Just a cover. A way to lure people in, trap them, and make them disappear. I left that apartment the very next day and never looked back. I moved across the city, changed my phone number, blocked every email, and changed my locks. But it wasn't enough. I still check my back seat every time I get in the car. I double-check the locks before I go to bed. I even moved to a new job, just in case. And sometimes, when I think about that apartment, I wonder how many other people Mr. Hopkins had done this to before me. How many lives he'd ruined, all in the name of a place he couldn't let go. If you ever get a call from a private number, or someone seems a little too eager to help, listen to your gut. Trust it, because sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. Story 10. It's about a house that seemed like a dream come true, but for my family, it turned into a nightmare. I want you to listen carefully, because this one's not like the others you've probably heard. It's real, at least it felt that way at the time. I'm Sarah, 32 years old, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Cleveland. I work as a freelance graphic designer, so I spend most of my days at home, with the occasional trip to coffee shops to get some air. My husband Mike is a middle school teacher, and we have two kids, Lucas, who's 7, and Zoe, who's 4. Like a lot of families, we weren't exactly rolling in money. But things were okay, until the lease on our apartment expired. The rent had gone up too high, and with everything else, we were scrambling to find a new place. We had the budget for a modest house, but not much else. That's when we came across the Craigslist ad. It seemed too good to be true, a free house. The ad said the owner had to move out of the country for work, and the house was up for grabs for anyone who would follow a few simple rules. No security deposit, no rent. Just follow the rules and it's yours. At first, we thought it was a scam. Who gives away a house for free? But when Mike and I talked it over, we figured we didn't have much to lose. We reached out, and within hours we got a reply. The owner, a man named John, said he'd explain everything in person. The next day we drove to the house. It was located in a quiet part of town, tucked away in a neighborhood with old trees lining the streets. The house looked perfect from the outside, old but well kept. The kind of place you could imagine raising kids in. There was a small yard, a big front porch, and a long gravel driveway. It felt like home before we even stepped inside. John greeted us at the door. He was tall, thin, and a little disheveled, but his handshake was firm. He gave us a quick tour of the house, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a spacious living room with old wooden floors, and a kitchen that had more counter space than we'd ever had in our apartment. It was all a little strange, though. Everything was a little too clean, a little too perfect. When we sat down to talk, he got serious. "The house is yours," he said, "but there are some rules." We exchanged glances. First, don't go into the attic. Don't touch anything there. Second, never go into the basement after midnight. Third, keep the windows closed at night, especially in the winter. And lastly, never leave the house empty for too long. That's all. I remember Mike and I looking at each other, and I could see the skepticism in his eyes. But honestly, what choice did we have? The house was free, and it seemed harmless enough. We agreed to the rules, signed the papers, and moved in the next week. The first few days were blissful. The kids loved their new rooms, the neighborhood was peaceful, and I finally had the space I'd been craving. Everything felt normal, but it wasn't long before things started to feel off. It was subtle at first. Mike thought he saw someone standing in the backyard one evening when he was out in the garden, but when he went to check, no one was there. Zoe started talking to imaginary friends, which, kids do that, right? But she started mentioning details about the house, things she couldn't have known unless she'd been there before, like the old rocking chair in the living room. She'd tell us how it used to rock by itself. And then it started happening to me. I'd be in the kitchen preparing dinner, and I'd hear footsteps upstairs. Not just any footsteps, but slow, heavy footsteps, like someone was walking in a room directly above me, even though no one was up there. I'd run up, expecting to catch one of the kids playing or maybe Mike moving around, but every time, the room would be empty. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. I told myself I was hearing things, or maybe the house was settling. But the noises didn't stop. Every night, it was the same, footsteps, doors creaking, something heavy dragging across the floorboards. But it was the attic that really got to me. I hadn't been up there. After all, John told us not to go. But one night, when the house felt too quiet, I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the attic door. I could swear I saw a shadow move behind it. I thought I was losing my mind. But the more I ignored it, the worse it got. Mike started having nightmares, and Lucas began sleepwalking. He'd end up standing in the hallway, staring at the attic door like he was waiting for something to happen. I tried talking to Mike about it, but he didn't believe me. He thought it was just stress. Maybe it was, but something felt wrong. Then one night, everything changed. It was around midnight, and I was in bed reading when I heard the footsteps again. Only this time, they weren't just upstairs. They were in the hallway, moving closer. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I waited, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but the sound was too real. And then, the door to the kids' room creaked open. I shot out of bed, heart racing, and sprinted down the hall. But when I reached the room, it was empty. Lucas wasn't there. I rushed to the living room, and then the kitchen, calling his name, but no answer. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone, ready to call Mike, when I heard a soft giggle. It was coming from the attic. I tried to push the fear down as I climbed the stairs. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe Lucas had wandered up there in his sleep, or maybe the house was playing tricks on me again. But when I opened the attic door, I didn't see my son. Instead, the room was completely empty, save for an old, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. The mirror. I'd never noticed it before. It was large, framed in cracked wood, and covered in a thick layer of dust. As I stepped closer, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I looked into the reflection, and I saw Lucas. He was standing right behind me, his face twisted in fear. I spun around, but no one was there. I turned back to the mirror, and the reflection was gone. I ran downstairs, heart pounding, and found Lucas in his bed, sleeping soundly. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The next day, Mike finally started to believe me. After I told him about the mirror and the attic, he agreed to check things out. But when we opened the attic door together, there was no mirror. Nothing but empty space. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. We tried to leave. We really did. But it was like the house wouldn't let us. No matter how many times we packed our bags and tried to leave, something always stopped us. The driveway would be blocked by an old car that wasn't ours. The front door wouldn't open. Once, when Mike tried to drive away, the car wouldn't start. Every time we tried to leave, something twisted the situation, forcing us to stay. And then, the hallucinations began. Mike started seeing the house as it was when John had lived there. Old furniture, old photographs, the walls covered in strange symbols that he couldn't remember seeing before. The walls felt like they were closing in on us, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. We were trapped, and we couldn't escape. And then came the final straw. One night, just after midnight, I heard the footsteps again, except this time, they weren't in the hallway. They were right behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. The shadow moved across the room, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. The house had been waiting for us, and now it was coming for us. I don't know how it ended. I can't remember how we finally escaped, but when I look back, all I can think is how much I wish we'd never answered that ad. If you ever see a free house on Craigslist, trust me, some things aren't free for a reason. And if you think it's all in your head, maybe you should listen to the footsteps. Because sometimes they're not just in your mind. Stay safe, everyone. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that might just keep you up at night.